Orisa meta is finally upon us, and it's a pretty terrible experience. Orisa is this unkillable monster that is terrorizing your games, but I'm gonna tell you the secrets to never lose to an Orisa again. Now, in order to tell you how to beat Orisa, we need to talk about her strengths and weaknesses so we can find the things that we need to avoid and the things that we need to exploit. The first one is her strengths, and the number one thing is that she's really unkillable. Like, it's incredibly hard to actually kill an Orisa that has any sort of help at all. If she has a single other person that is healing her or supporting her, all of a sudden she is just this unstoppable monster. And even without that, if she has cooldowns, she is just pretty much invulnerable. You got to think like everything about her kit makes her tankier or harder to kill, and this is the biggest thing about Orisa that we're gonna need to solve if we want to shut her down in the meta. Now, in addition to that, she has incredibly large amounts of CC. And before we continue, if you could CC that like button, okay. But Orisa has a crazy amount of crowd control, not only with her spiral, but also her javelin and her ultimate as well. And you combine that with the fact that she's anti-crowd control with her fortify, means that she can ignore the type of crowd control you're trying to enforce on her while simultaneously slamming you into a wall over and over again, and not in the fun way. But the last key strength to Orisa is the fact that she actually does quite a bit of damage from close range. If you're within the range that she can CC you non-stop, she also can kill you rather quickly. So any person that gets caught by her can easily die if they don't have movement abilities. So characters like Ana, characters like Cass, the list goes on and on. Anything that can't run away will get destroyed if you get too close. Now, while these are frustrating to deal with, there are key weaknesses that we need to consider, and these are the ways that we're gonna beat her. So number one is Orisa is fairly linear, and what I mean by that is she prefers the fight to be in front of her, where she can control the engagement. She prefers the Voltron style of fighting, where it's a group of 5 versus a group of 5. The more resources that she gets and the more resources that you dump into her, the more value she gets, because she's ignoring everything you're doing. She's ignoring all your damage, all your nades, while at the same time helping her team mitigate all those cooldowns because she's eating them and just not caring. So while she wants this kind of fight, she really hates the type of fight that is all around her, right? She doesn't want people to the left, the right, behind, in front, above. She really wants the fights to be in one direction, which is something we can directly exploit with a number of different characters that we'll talk about. In addition to that, just like I said, she had high close range damage. She is also pretty weak at anything outside of those close ranges. While she could still poke, she's not a actual legitimized threat unless she's relatively near you. So characters that can heavily outrange her don't have to worry about her that much, and playing at a super far distance from her where she can't easily get on top of you is going to make it so she can't CC you and she can't do a lot of damage to you. In addition to that, Orisa has pretty low mobility. She's not jumping into your backline. She's not going to be able to quickly transverse through a giant amount of space, and this is a really big weakness, because this means that as long as you understand where she's at and what she's trying to do, you can always play away from her and never end up in a situation where she just gets to kill you for free or put herself in between you and who you're actually trying to hurt. And last but certainly not least, she has a specific weakness to height or things that fly. So she doesn't really do anything to people that are sitting on the high ground. If she's on the low ground, she has to navigate, which means she's bad on certain maps that are really high ground centric. And on top of that, any characters that fly, Echo, Pharah, Orisa can't do anything to these characters at all. So what does this actually mean you need to do versus Orisa? And the number one tip is the one I'm always going to give: stop shooting at her. And I say this over and over again, and I coach this, and people still shoot at her. And the reason that people shoot at her is because oftentimes they're positioned wrong. If you're ever in a position where you have no one else to shoot but Orisa, or you can't find a way to ever shoot anything outside of Orisa, then you are not in the proper position most of the time if you're trying to actually deal damage. Oftentimes you want to be playing an off angle. You want to be playing the high ground. You want to be playing in a position where you have an angle on the enemy backline and the enemy DPS and the enemy supports that is away from Orisa. And if everyone is doing this on your team, or even a couple of people, the Orisa cannot stop you all, especially if you're playing high ground and you're playing from weird angles. This Orisa wants to look at one person and focus on one person or one glob of people, and the more spread you are, the more angles you'll have. In addition to that, you can also play characters that just dive straight up onto the back line, because an Orisa that is pulling back, an Orisa that is not Voltron fighting, but rather looking around for a tracer in her backline, is an Orisa that is not being effective and playing to her strengths. Now, the next thing that you need to do against an Orisa is never put yourself in a position that she can walk on you. It is not your tank's job to stop an Orisa. In fact, most tanks cannot do anything about an Orisa that just wants to beeline to you. If you're an Ana and there's an Orisa that gets on top of you, if you're a Cass and there's an Orisa that gets on top of you, if you're any character and this Orisa keeps killing you, walking on top of you, and she can literally physically touch you with her freaking spin, then you are in the wrong position. You are not playing your effective range, you are playing far too close to the Orisa, and you're not respecting where she could go. This is super, super important because an Orisa should always be kept at a distance, and you are not trying to fight the Orisa directly. I don't care if she's on the objective. I don't care any place that she's in. No matter where she's at, your goal is not to fight her. That's what she wants you to do. Your goal is to find a fundamental advantage on the battlefield and kill the Orisa at the very end of that advantage. So, as an example, the Orisa's playing the front line. Y'all play off angles. One of y'all gets a kill. One of y'all gets a pick. Supports are helping DPS control these off angles. You're constantly keeping away from Orisa, and then you kill a number of her teammates, and then when she no longer has the resources to just sit there unfazed, you get to actually kill her. This is super, super important, but if you're dying to Orisa in your games all the freaking time, it's a positioning problem the majority of the time, especially if you're dying to an Orisa first or second in a fight. It should never, ever happen, and you're not respecting where the Orisa could be. I really do think that this happens more than other tanks, specifically because other tanks have to respect your damage and abilities much more than Orisa does. If like a Rhine inted or like a Ramatra inted on you as Ana, you're like, oh, I can at least nade them and sleep them and I'll be just fine because my teammates will help me eventually and I'll slow them down enough. With Orisa, she does not care about any of what you have to offer. She does not care. She will walk on you. She doesn't care about your abilities. She doesn't care if 3 people are shooting at her while she's attacking you. She'll kill you before it matters. And that's why your only ally is playing your range and playing away from what she can do, not relying on your abilities or damage at all. Now, I know there's another frustrating aspect of this where there are certain maps and certain places on maps where avoiding an Orisa like that is just not possible. There are close corridors, there are cubbies, there are certain points, objectives, maps, whatever the case may be. These are places where Orisa gets to play where she likes to play, and if you want to push up and do anything, you kind of play into her range. Now, here's the thing though. Oftentimes, you either one, need to avoid these areas at all possible. If you're going to have a team fight, if you're going to fight anywhere, make sure that you're fighting in open areas or areas that do not force you to be in like a boxing match with an Orisa. That's exactly what you don't want. Remember, you want more dynamic fights, you want more scrappy fights. And then another big part of this is not prioritizing objectives or things like that until you get the advantage. Like, oftentimes a Koth point will open and everyone was like, oh, we want to be the first team to cap Koth, and everyone runs on the point. Guess what? You're running right into the effective range of the Orisa. Orisa gets to see all of y'all together and fight y'all as a glob, exactly what she wants to do, and you're gonna lose. So oftentimes you have to give up 10, 20, maybe even 30% to find an advantage because you can't take objective right away against an Orisa. You have to find the space, and then you put yourself in a situation that after you get that advantage, then you can fight the Orisa, then you can take the point. This is super important, and it really plays as the opposite of what people want to do. Oftentimes, they touch the card, they touch the objective, and your instinct is to run face first into there to deny it, but that's exactly what the Orisa wants, and you're playing right into her strengths, so you can't do that. Now, this is a big point, and I kind of referenced it there, but it's super important that you really remember this. Orisa thrives in 5v5 team fights. And what I mean by that is, Orisa wants a 5 glob versus a 5 glob. You need to make things scrappy. Flanking as a duo. If you're a support and you're just sitting behind your tank, constantly healing them, not really doing anything, find a way to allow these off angles to happen. Teleport in as Kiriko with your duo on a flank. Go enable them. Go follow through. Try to find some advantage in a scrappy fight. Split up. Separate your duos. Fight all around. Don't fight in a glob. If you're not playing the Orisa mirror, you do not want to engage in what I call these Voltron fights, which is just 5-man glob all pumping their resources into their Orisa and fighting you. You want to make things scrappy, find angles, find advantage, find the enemy team, find an enemy squishy, kill them, and pick them apart, not fight them like you're freaking goats, you know? But let's specifically talk about the hero counters in every single role that can allow you to really shut down an Orisa super easily. So, First up, let's talk about D.Va, which I think is one of the better characters to deal with in Orisa, mainly because you never have to engage her directly. You're picking and choosing your battles. D.Va's going to often play the high ground, look to peel or deny an Orisa's play, and find an opportunity with their team. They're playing the high ground, they're playing little off angles, they're just looking for an opportunity. Someone low, someone tagged, someone out of position, and then they swoop in and kill that person, and the Orisa is going to try to come and peel the D.Va, but if you have DM, you can just deny that and then fly back away. You got an advantage, and you're just kind of whittling them down over time. Essentially, D.Va plays directly into a lot of the stuff we talked about, where you really don't want to take a fight directly with her. You want to find a way to get value around her and then finish her off after the fact. Now, Winston can be good. Bubble is actually pretty good at denying a lot of what Orisa can do. If you're jumping really deep and the Orisa's too far away, she can't javelin to stop you through Bubble, and you're going to be able to kill her backline before she does anything. But there's a couple caveats here. Number one, if they have a certain type of backline that is hard to dive, it can be difficult, like a BAP and Brig or something along those lines. This might be a little bit hard. And two, this is only gonna work if you have other divers with you that are willing to coordinate with you. Like if you're a Winston alone, good luck countering an Orisa. But if you're a Winston with like a Tracer and Genji, now we're talking, because we can try to set up in a situation where the Orisa pushes too forward and her supports are too far back. We jump past and then we get those kills. But let's talk about Zarya, which I think is the only tank that can really fight Orisa in a straight up fight. She can out-brawl an Orisa, mainly because if you get to max charge, you just ignore a lot of what Orisa's doing. You just ignore her javelin spin, you ignore all of her CC, you just don't care, and you can actually out-brawl her, but you have to be able to get that high charge and then still be able to fight her, so you're gonna have to play really based off your cooldowns. You can never afford to really die, or else you're gonna get reset, and until you have high energy, you're just gonna be worse than Orisa a lot of the times in the brawl. So keep this in mind, and I do think that if you have the skill set required on Zarya, you can definitely deadlift on her in this matchup, but there are also other factors and other characters that could be a problem for you, so it kind of depends on the characters that are around Orisa, if it works or doesn't work, and how good you are at Zarya. But if you're looking to brawl her straight up and you don't want to play the mirror, I think Zarya is perfectly fine. And then last up is Sigma. Poke is actually really good against Orisa, because all you do is you just play really, really far at range outside of what Orisa can do, and you just slowly build up your ultimates. You play for long fights, and you're gonna make sure that you're never in a position where the enemy team can kind of push up onto you, because you want to play at range and you just want to constantly poke, because in the poke mirror, you're gonna out damage Orisa over time, and your ultimates are gonna be more impactful from the neutral oftentimes, especially like Sigma ult is typically gonna be a lot better than Orisa ult if you're all playing from a distance and just poking. So there's ways in which you can actually win the fight over time, and if your DPS are kind of taking these longer angles, Orisa can't do anything about them. They're gonna get angles onto the enemy backline, and they can potentially get picks. So on a lot of the sniper maps, Sigma is still going to be far better than Orisa is if you play him properly. Just never let the Orisa force a brawl with you, because that's kind of what she wants to do. She wants to get up close and personal, and you want to keep her at range where you're effective and she's not as effective. Now for DPS, I did talk about Tracer and other divers, characters that can get around the Orisa and just be this like annoying little gnat, or characters that can just ignore the Orisa and dive onto a specific target. Like an Orisa can stand on the front line just fine, but if a Genji Tracer go and flank and dive in on us simultaneously and kill him in the Orisa's backline, Orisa can't really do anything about it. I mean, unless they're a goat and they just hit like the most amazing javelin of all time. But really, you're going to be able to pick and choose your fights, pick apart the enemy backline, and you're not going to really have to care about Orisa nearly as much. Characters that fly, Echo, Pharah, these characters are just a nightmare for Orisa to deal with, mainly because Orisa can't do anything about them, and if you have a Mercy with you, now that's another person that the Orisa can't interact with either when the Mercy's up in the air. The Orisa kind of just can't do anything to you at all. Like, imagine this example, right? Let's say you have a Tracer, let's say you have a Kiriko, let's say you have a Mercy and a Pharah, and then your tank is like something that can just kind of be on his own and will never get killed by the Orisa if he just stays away, like a Doomfist or something. All of a sudden, what does the Orisa even do? Like, the Orisa does actually nothing. They can't stop the Pharah, they can't kill the Tracer, they can't stop the tank if the tank just plays slow and doesn't hard engage, and you just, yeah, it's like a fight between the squishies. It's like not even a fight between the tanks. There are ways to make Orisa literally completely irrelevant in a team fight and in a game overall. Now, hit scans and characters like Hanzo and Sojourn are a little bit trickier because you do have to find these off angles and these high ground angles, and depending on the map, this is going to be harder or easier to do. So I think these characters can be good, but you got to make sure that you can actually find these angles, and sometimes the maps don't really play to allow you to do so nearly as much. And also, range is a really important factor here. So characters like Cassidy, who can't really off angle very far away or else he's doing no damage, is not going to be a great pick, because him pushing up to do more damage is going to push him up into the effective range of Orisa. Now, the last role, and certainly not least role, we have support. And there's a lot of supports that I think can work in different compositions. Namely, Kiriko is probably the best support straight up against Orisa, mainly because our Kiriko just doesn't care about what Orisa's doing. You can teleport away, you can fight from a distance, you can go and TP to your DPS that are controlling off angles, which is what you want to do anyways. You can go for plays on off angles yourself. You basically get to completely avoid the Orisa and never be threatened by her at all, and that's like exactly what you want to be. So Kiriko is just like a slam dunk. I think that even a character like Moira can be pretty good if you're playing dive, like if the Moira is going with you in the back line, with the Genji, with the Tracer, trying to kill someone in the back line. Oftentimes in ranked, you can do this and it's super powerful. Just an Ana getting jumped on by a Moira and a Tracer, it's just going to kill her right away, and Moira is just not going to care nearly that much about Orisa as well. And then characters like Zen, if you are actually trying to poke out the Orisa somewhat, Zen is one of the few ways that I think you can actually kill an Orisa, but he's really gonna only thrive, I think, either in Orisa mirrors or in a situation where you're playing like a Sigma and a Zen, because then you can like double poke her out and just apply a ton of pressure. It's gonna bait out her cooldowns a lot, and she's never gonna get an opportunity to really walk up onto you. Now, if you do want to play the Voltron mirror, like the straight up Orisa v Orisa mirror, one of the characters that I think is like a sleeper right now for that mirror is Lifeweaver. And one of the reasons that Lifeweaver feels pretty good this patch is mainly because if your Orisa has a Lifeweaver supporting them in a mirror, in a situation where the Orisa gets to overextend, use and exhaust all their cooldowns, get value, and then get pulled out, it's super, super strong. But keep in mind, like I said, like let's say you're up against that, right? That's even more of a reason to not focus the Orisa, because you're never going to kill them. You got to kill either the Lifeweaver or someone else first, because you're just never going to get an opportunity to ever kill an Orisa that just gets a Lifeweaver pocket perma, right? But this is the definitive guide on how to completely counter Orisa meta. But if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments down below, because I don't want any of y'all losing to Orisa ever a freaking again. But anyways, smash the like, subscribe if you enjoy the content. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see you next time.